Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about critical thinking in regards to peer mentoring certification and the tutoring certification. The important concepts that we need to think about is the core critical thinking skills. We're going to talk a little bit about ways in which to help students analyze, draw inferences, explain things, interpret things, self-regulate things, as well as evaluate things. As we discuss critical thinking, an important question is, what is critical thinking? In looking at critical thinking, we're thinking about things in order to make things better. We're thinking how to assess itself. And looking at this word art, there's different things about judgment, about reflection, about drawing conclusion, and about logic. And each of our roles that we play, either in the tutoring aspect or in peer mentoring, we want to help our students to think critically. In doing so, we want to make sure that they take in the information and are able to use it in a relevant way and draw inferences as well. As we look at this diagram, the three dimensions of critical thinking, we want students to analyze thinking as a focus on parts. We want to help them evaluate thinking by focusing on the standards. And we want them to improve on thinking by using what they have learned. And we can do that in the capacity of tutors during their tutoring session, as well as mentors during their mentoring session. We want them to not just always take what they heard and think that it is true, but why it is true, what is the research saying, and just also in terms of peer mentoring, allowing them or encourage them to make better choices. And with making choices, we want them to be versed and understand maybe some of the resources on campus and what are the different things that they can use and how that can offer them to make better choices in terms of life and academics as well. As we look at this little picture that I have on the top of this slide, it talks a little bit about critical thinking and analysis in different contexts. And again, we want our students to utilize critical thinking in everyday life at the university and within different disciplines. So whether you are tutoring something in history and political science, or a mentor and kind of discussing different modalities within your mentoring sessions, you want them to think critically. Okay, we want to use education as a concept that defines a set of higher order goals. And again, that can be discussed within the tutoring role as well as mentoring role. What are some of their goals that they eventually want to accomplish? And how can we narrow the gap between the goals and the results? What kind of things can our students do in order to achieve those goals that they set forth? So it's important to help them in terms of narrowing their goals the best way that they can reach their best results. So as we look at this next slide, the question is, how can we make high order goals a practical reality? In this little picture we have here, I got it. We want our students to get it, okay? We want our students to be successful in whatever capacity that we're either tutoring or mentoring. So that in math classes, students learn to think mathematically, or in history classes, they learn to think historically, or if they're in a science class, that we want them to think scientifically. So we want them to understand things, and in the capacity of mentoring, if it's talking about the importance of reaching out for tutoring in general, or touching base with their professors during office hours, that they begin to understand and get the importance of doing so, and how that can allow them to be successful and persist. So the bottom line, as we all well know, it is not what is taught, but what is learned. When you think you are through learning, that will be your biggest mistake. It is how much you learn and retain after you do a specific project, good or bad. Review it and navigate yourself better next time. That was a quote that I had found. So we want our students to love critical thinking but also to understand if they do make mistakes, how to learn from those, what kind of things they need to do. And I know with us in mentoring, we always tell them to, complete now it being online, but the tutoring forms, just to be proactive versus it be a remedial measure. Help them to be more engaged, help them to utilize those resources on campus. But again, like I said before, if they've made a mistake or if they hadn't done well in a certain subject, what kind of things they need to do, and how to reach out and do so. We need to realize that us being mentoring and tutors, we can improve student performance by improving a student's way of thinking. We can improve a student's thinking only by creating opportunities and incentives for them to think. And we want them to give them up the opportunity to praise them. I know with a lot of our mentors and even with the tutors, I've being my office being right in the tutoring center, I hear the positive praise that our tutors and our mentors provide to our students. That in itself can be an incentive. Great job, that's awesome. Just different things that maybe not otherwise they may hear. But giving them and allowing them to have those opportunities, and also making sure that they know, yes, we are there for you. And I know in the capacity of peer mentoring, the peer mentors work on a lot of different things with our students, and so do the tutors. Not only do the tutors go and discuss the actual subject, but they also work on study skills and different things like that. So it's just kind of important to provide, again, them with opportunities as well as provide them with incentives. Now, when we think of higher order learning and setting those goals, in higher order learning, it can be cultivated in almost any academic setting. By designing instruction so that the students explicitly grasp the sense, the logicalness of what they learn, we can all make an additional learning easier for them. And we can go ahead and look at this picture that I have on here. Now we have the idea, and we have the subcategories in different colors: the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how. Okay, so that we can colorfully understand the idea and how it kind of arised to the idea as well. Now, when we think of why critical thinking matters, again, we go back to that higher order learning and how that multiplies comprehension and insight. With lower order rote memorization and performance, multiply misunderstanding and prejudice. So if we just have our students just memorize things but not actually learn those, and they may not be as successful in kind of as other courses come along, utilizing some of that information in order to make things more understandable. Now with high order learning, it helps to almost empower the students, helps to build some stimulation into them. In lower order, that kind of sometimes discourages and limits the learner, and we want to provide them with as much fuel as possible. With good mentoring and tutoring, if we can focus on high content, on basic needs and issues taught in different ways, which actively can engage the student on reflection and more on thought, we can better prepare the student to be able to attack anything that kind of comes along to them. As we mentioned before, in the role and capacity of a peer mentor and a tutor, we try to engage our students as much as possible. And in some of these dialogues or in some of these tutoring sessions, we not only go over that initial material, but we also kind of go over important study skills. So those kind of two concepts can go hand in hand. Now, when we often talk about knowledge as thought, it can be divorced from thinking. as though it could be gathered by one person and given to another in the form of a collection of sentences to remember. When we talk in this way, we forget that knowledge, by its very nature, depends on thought. And again, we want to build this in our students, either in the capacity of a tutoring session or a mentoring session as well. Now, we need to help our students learn how to, again, think. Knowledge is produced by thought. So, analyzing by thought, comprehension by thought, organized and evaluated can be maintained and transferred to thought. Okay, knowledge exists, but we need to properly speak only in the minds that have comprehended and justified it through thought. Now, we keep hearing over and over again, thought. And when we say thought, we mean critically thinking or thought, okay? And again, in looking at this brief little picture here, critical thinking, a way of thinking rather than a method or a set of steps to follow. Now, some of those characteristics could be clear and focused and active, persistent, purposeful, open, flexible. And some of those activities can include just choosing. Can we weigh alternatives? Can we consider what to do? Can we examine basis of beliefs or ask pertinent questions? Can we become aware of assumptions? And again, some of these activities can be bridged within both a tutoring or a mentoring session. Having our students just really think things out in terms of either academics or personal life as well. Okay, so when we think critically, we realize that knowledge must be distinguished from the memorization. Again, we talked about that, of true statements. People can easily blindly memorize what they do not understand. Okay, so we want our students to understand the material. Again, whether it's something that you're discussing during a mentoring session or the subject that you're discussing during a tutoring session. A book contains knowledge only in derivative sense, only because minds can thoughtfully read it, and through this analytic process we can gain the knowledge. Okay, I want you to read and think. I want them to think, to understand the material, and be able to also deliver that and explain it to you during whichever session it may be, either mentoring or tutoring, okay, so that you kind of get a sense that yes, they do understand that material. The important thing is to allow the student to understand that all knowledge exists in and through critical thought. Okay, all the disciplines, whether it be mathematics, physics, chemistry, bio, geography, soc, anthropology, all of those areas, it can allow a student different modes of thinking and understanding. But we have to also find a way in which to deliver that information in a way that a student can build some critical thought and be able to also explain that thought as well. Now, when we review certain ideas and subjects in such a way that students just pass courses or just kind of go through the motions without thinking rather than understanding the way into the knowledge, students leave sessions with no more knowledge than they had when they entered them. Okay, and this kind of goes hand in hand with either tutoring or mentoring, whichever topics may be discussed during a mentoring session or whatever subject may be discussed. So when we sacrifice thought to gain coverage, we sacrifice knowledge at the same time, okay? So again, we need to help or bridge that understanding of the power that a student can have when they actually critically think. Okay, so when we have either a mentoring session or a tutoring session, focus on fundamental and powerful concepts with high generalizability. Don't cover hundreds of concepts at a given time, but present the concepts as far as possible in the context of their use as functional tools for the solution of real problems to help them analyze a significant issue. And again, this can go hand in hand, with going through that during a mentoring session, not going over 100 different things, but breaking it into smaller parts, or having group meetings. Same thing with tutoring, kind of you want to assess where the student is at that point, and kind of bridge your tutoring or your mentoring session to the needs of that student. Again, some of our sessions are group sessions, some of them are individual, but kind of get a sense of kind of where everybody is at that point. Now, keep the logic of the most basic concepts in the foreground, and continually reweaving new concepts into the basic ones. Okay, so again, they kind of get a sense of some foundation into whatever subject or discussion they may be having. Now, when also discussing critical thinking, either in the capacity of a mentor or a tutor, we want to make sure that our students are taking ownership. And that is the goal of all concepts covered. A student does not own a concept unless he can state, elaborate, and exemplify it in his or her own words. One's own idea when one can teach it and it's significant to someone else. Now, we need to allow our students to put things into perspective. When, taking ownership, we discuss their role in this learning environment. And sometimes we may hear some students, place blame either on a professor or, whoever. But also allowing them, like I said before, to take ownership, and allow them to make change as they kind of see fit. But sometimes we need to give them a better understanding of different things maybe that they have done, and maybe suggesting or offering some suggestions and ways to kind of change things up again, but kind of allow them to take ownership within their personal and academic life as well. Okay, so let's help our students kind of keep calm and think critically. Now, when we design all our activities and meeting when tutoring or mentoring, so the students must think their way through them, okay? Give them some suggestions. Discuss different things that are going on and how they may be able to, handle a situation differently. Now, let's lead discussions on the kind of thinking that is required at that time. Let's break, either the session into smaller groups. If we need to, some of our mentoring sessions may do a small group. Again, but you kind of have to assess the need and devise specific time limits in terms of different things that you want your students to gain. Now, I have this picture because I want you guys to kind of understand how critical thinking can be done in various different components. Again, here in this picture we have a business and performance plan, and they have a vision. Now they're focusing on the thinking, they're planning on the thinking, doing the thinking, making decisions, talking about the activities or taking actions, and then review and improve. Okay, again, we need to envision that in our students, that we can improve. Now, we need to develop specific strategies for cultivating critical reading and writing and speaking and listening. So we need to really help our students to understand certain concepts and how to read the text for themselves actively and analytically. Okay, and some of our students have different facets of learning, but kind of engaging them to assess that for themselves, so that they can understand what exactly they are reading or doing, or whatever thing they might be doing in terms of if they're having a peer mentoring session, having them or allowing them to also speak exactly what they may be feeling at that particular moment. Okay, as we continue to talk about critical thinking, I have this little picture here. Critical thinking, learning without thought is a labor lost, and that's something Confucius said. Now, we need to model behaviors that you want to see in your students, okay? Have them practice what you modeled. Speak less so that they think more. Let them hear how you're kind of puzzling through things slowly, through a certain subject or problem. Help them transition that into the process of puzzling out answers for themselves. Okay, have them kind of model different things for you or ask questions, so that you kind of help them be more engaged, and understand and kind of build and bridge thought. Now, as we look here at this picture, it kind of provides us with some keys to critical thinking. Again, we want to stop and think. We want to recognize assumptions. We want to evaluate information. And then we want to draw conclusions. And then lastly, a plan of action. So when critically thinking, in the deepest and fullest meaning of that phrase, is equivalent to higher order thinking again. It engages us in involving the process in which we can progressively take control of our own thinking, okay? Allow that, bridge that, make that student understand that they have that control, okay? It's also disciplining it by degrees, making it more and more responsive to evidence and reason, having the student understand the need for research and maybe what some of the lead researchers are saying on a certain topic, or if you're discussing something during a mentoring session. We want that to extend to ever more domains and situations, so moving from a certain topic or from a certain subject, but helping them understand different subjects and helping them to evaluate, again, draw conclusions, and then finally have a plan of action for themselves. Okay, so either during a peer mentoring session or tutoring session, we kind of know or need to know where our student stands. What are they thinking? We naturally use it to create, build upon, reform, modify, and redesign our beliefs and behaviors. So students need time to assimilate this conception. They need to tie it into their experience, to try it out in their own everyday life, to integrate it into their own thinking, or to translate it into meaningful parts, okay? So sometimes it's okay to bring about either personal experiences, to kind of have them understand the material and put it into real life terms. Now, let's take the long view. In the race between the tortoise and the hare, the tortoise always wins. So, short term reform can do no more than foster surface reform. So, deep change takes extended time, patience, perseverance, understanding, and commitment. Okay? Critically think. Okay? Let's have our students make some deep changes, but if it takes some time, okay, but tell them the importance of it, and the more they work at something, the better they may be, and the better that they will understand the material or discussion at hand. Okay, so as we look at this brief picture here, it says questions, building the foundation for critical thinking. We're basic on the bottom, how high you can go, advanced being on the top. So basic would be remember, what are the facts, the who, what, when, where, how. Then, okay, let's bridge on that. Let's understand, what do you know about the facts? Can you explain it? Can you describe what? What does it mean? Give an example, okay? Then we want them to apply. How do the facts affect you? How would you solve something? What would the result be if? What would you use this in? Okay, then again, bridge on that, and then have them analyzing. What is the relationship between the facts? What do you think? What motivate? What is the motive? There. What can you conclude? Okay, and again, bridging on that evaluation. Do you agree or disagree with this? With the facts? Would it be better if? Why do you think that? What would you recommend? And then finally, creating something. How could you create or improve the facts? What would it be like if? Or can you elaborate on the reason? What would happen if? Now, incentives, again, let's go back, as students start to kind of understand this in a sense. Again, we want to build that positive praise that I talked about before. We want to provide for those students and help them to implement within the process. And many small changes will be necessary before larger changes take place, and help our students to understand that. Now, again, as we mentioned before, those key critical thinking skills, we have kind of captured that into the red, the RED, the recognizing the assumptions, the evaluating arguments, and then drawing conclusions. But we need to also make our students understand a slow but steady progress with continual monitoring and adjusting of efforts is best, okay? So if things are not working, how can we adjust different things? What can the students do? What kind of suggestions can we offer them, okay? Helping the student understand some short-term and long-term goals. Where do they see themselves now, at the end of the semester, them graduating, okay? And then we need to work continually to institutionalize change as the understanding of higher order thinking and as it grows, okay? So building that understanding, allowing them to make some of those changes, and offering them suggestions as well. Now, I thought it was important to add Bloom's taxonomy. I know that's something that I really utilize in my writing as well. But you can help a student kind of understand some of these, and again, about knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, and understand what those things mean. Now, knowledge being remembering previously learned information, moving to comprehending it, and that means demonstrating an understanding of the facts. Now, when we move to application, we have a student apply knowledge to actual situations. Let's put something into real life terms. And then we have an analysis. We break down the objects or the ideas into simpler parts and find evidence to support some of these generalizations. And then again, we have them synthesize, compile components, ideas into a new whole or purpose alternative solutions. And then finally, evaluation, making and defending arguments, but only based on internal evidence or external criteria. And I thought it was important. There's some really good verbs that some of these students can use in their writing, or if they are given a certain assignment and some of these words, they kind of are labeled there for them. They kind of understand of what are some of the things that the professor may be expecting of them, or if you're discussing certain areas, what kind of things they can best explain to you in real life terms. So again, go ahead and take a peek at some of those words. Again, if we're looking at knowledge, maybe we can arrange things, maybe we can outline or recognize. When we're comprehending, can we identify things? Can we paraphrase things? When we're asked to apply, can we change, choose, operate, practice, or predict? When we're analyzing things, can we also distinguish, examine things, or outline certain things? And when we're asked to synthesize stuff, are we asked to construct, combine, summarize? And finally, when we're asked to evaluate things, we're, I guess, in a sense, allowing a student to compare, to conclude, evaluate, or justify, or interpret. Okay, so those are just kind of some words and a way in which to kind of build and bridge some knowledge in our students. And I'd like to end with this last slide, and we'll have a quick about 4 or 5 minute YouTube video on the importance of critical thinking. But if we could just take a moment and review again, having here this little Bloom's taxonomy, okay, the knowledge to remember, to understand and describe and explain, to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So when we teach and encourage critical thinking, we empower individuals' lives and invest in our collection of our future. So again, we're going to then watch a quick little video on YouTube, kind of just taking a moment to review the importance of critical thinking. Thank you.